You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile we put Ghana first. And my guest to help us, we'll begin very brief comments on the Assin North development, and then get to take care of bread and butter, because we know that we are likely to be plunged into doom. So actually today, what should have happened was that the IPPs would have shut down their plants, and what that would have meant was that you were most obviously not going to have power. But because they have suspended that, in the interim, we have power to work with and to use. So that is a very important matter. Also, there is the TOR, Tama Oil Refinery, that is being rented out. Its assets being rented out, so to speak, which is a matter that the CSOs, particularly the leading ones on the issue, ASEP and Imani Ghana, seem to say the deal reminds them of the botched PDS. Now, my guess, to begin with the first issue, Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante is Director Programs and Policy Engagement, CDD Ghana. Andrew Ejapa Mensah is MP Second D and Deputy Minister for Energy. Alexander Kofi Mensah Mold is also here with us in the studio. You know him, formerly of the GNPC. Now, thank you very much for making time to join us in the studio, and welcome those of you joining us via Zoom. And the Assin story is a very interesting one, and James Gyakye of the NDC won by 57.56% as against the NPP's candidates, who got 42.15%, and then another candidate, obviously the LPG, who won 0.29% of the vote. So let me begin with you, Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante. To start with, there are people who are making all the permutations about this particular outcome, and they say this is a verdict against the Supreme Court and against the state that is seeking to persecute and do injustice to the Gyakye, who, as we speak, his name has been expunged from the record of Parliament as having ever been an MP. Well, thankfully, he goes back once the EC takes the communication to the Speaker. He'll be sworn in again the second time, and his name will be restored.
Yeah, hello.
Yes,
good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, absolutely. Can you hear me?
Clearly.
A very good morning to everybody and co-panelists today. Yes, I mean, it was. I was in Assin North myself. It was an interesting election. I think going into the election, there was sort of high stakes for both the MPP and the NDC, because this is the first sort of competitive seat that both parties were going to contest for after the 2020 election. And given that this particular seat has been swinging, for many years, and both parties, this was almost like a test of their popularity or their strength as well. That is on the face of it. It was almost some sort of an assessment of whether or not the MPP, with all the challenges that it has had with the economic crisis, with some of its political challenges, internal party challenges, and so on, looking ahead through the 2024 election, whether or not it could be united, it could be, it can signal that it is still very competitive and still able to win an election regardless of its track record since 2020. So I think it was high stakes for the MPP, but also for the NDC, which is seeing the 2024 election as basically something that is very winnable, and they will see themselves as having a big advantage given the challenges of the MPP. And they were the ones who were holding the seat. So a defeat would have really deflated its own sense of preparedness for the 2024 election and where the citizens were. But everybody, I mean, the logic in politics is that at the end, when you put all of that together, politics is very much local. And the kind of narratives that were being built, where if you were there in Assin about the sequencing and how he has been treated and all of those kinds of things were very, very persuasive, So despite the real sort of deep incumbency abuse, and I miss no words, that this was, there was a lot of incumbency abuse with all the development, overnight development works, and these were very extensive development works. I saw it myself being in the constituency. All of those things, the inducements that
the people are actually alleging. The people are alleging that the heavy-duty machines that were, swamped the place for the purported development have all gone missing after the NPP lost. And we have actually heard an NPP, officer suggesting that the government should punish the people of Assin for being ungrateful, and that for not voting for them, they ought to be punished. So no development should be taken to their place.
Well, it's not his. He doesn't have any power. The Constitution doesn't allow that. So, and it shouldn't be coming from a member of the ruling party. That is not what parties are set up, to do, to discriminate and use the public's money to punish people. So I think that is very uncalled for.
That's the gentleman's understanding of the democracy. But are you surprised that he's not been condemned by his party, that is wrong? Because his party has issued a statement congratulating the NDC and Jachikwe Singh. Even the president has also issued a statement congratulating Jachikwe Singh, congratulating the NDC.
Yes. And then that is what has to be done, because, and I'll come, when we get into the abuse of incumbency and vote buying and how to curb that, we can really talk about principles, because I think the parties of our Fourth Republic have a huge responsibility if they don't understand the consequences and the continual persistence of these challenges. Then they have to think again. But I mean, just to say that some of these things I haven't heard, whether the bulldozers have pulled out and so on, we can verify. But I mean, on election day, they were still working. So even on election day, you couldn't miss the fact that some of the roads, were still being done and all of that. But I mean, it's to say that, as I said, politics at the end was for me local. And even as I stood at one of the polling stations where the counting was going on, I could just hear the sentiments of the voters still repeating their pain that Mr. Jachikwe Singh has been taking through these, ordeal in their view, and therefore they wanted him to win, to send a message to the government that they didn't like what was being done to him. And if you look at the results across the constituency, and it's a very interesting constituency for me, because it's probably the most diverse, in terms of the strengths of each party from electoral area to electoral area. Mr. Jachikwe Singh actually performed very well in sort of strongholds of the MPP. Actually, he was competing very strongly in all of those, and that's what showed in his overall performance. And he did something similar in 2020, but I think even in this election in particular, it was quite surprising that he was very competitive in very strong MPP areas. So it means that the emotional factor and people's narrative around what they believe was his treatment was one that really, I think, played a strong role in his victory.
Well, what do you make of some of the statements coming from the people, the voters there? They were told by the ruling party that don't vote for James Assin because he's standing criminal prosecution and he could go to jail. In fact, there are some members of the NPP who did not say he could go to jail, who said that they are definite that he will go to jail, including lawyers within the NPP. And the president also made similar comments and said he's a potential candidate for jail, so don't vote for him. What do you make of what we heard overwhelmingly from the voters who suggest that, well, if he will go to jail, we don't care? And others say, well, if we vote him and he gets, as it were, convicted and sentenced, and he doesn't get to serve us, at least there will be another by-election. And we can see now that it takes by-elections for constituencies to get attention and development.
Well, it's actually a sad sort of commentary, your latter point, but I'll come to that. I think that sentiment was a very strong sentiment. That they I mean, literally, as you said it, and I heard a few women talking about it when I was standing during the counting, that they would vote for him so that if they want to jail him, they can jail him. One thing that was clear is that at the local level, this idea of a dual citizenship doesn't resonate. It couldn't be broken down in people's understanding of belonging, where somebody belongs and whether they are Ghanaian. So people were saying, well, the man has even buried his mother at his home. You know, they know the family. So if you say that he's not Ghanaian or doesn't come from here, what do you mean? So the law for which Alhaji Sekunde and others have, were prosecuted and all of that, it's obvious that, at a certain local level, people don't really appreciate the nuances of it. And it didn't penetrate because the way in which locals perceive these things about whether you belong. On the other hand, people felt Mr. Charles Opoku, even though he has been around and people know of him and so on, thought that he was just a recent, how do you say, he's just recently known as a person, of the community.
Right.
So as to who belongs, and sometimes the laws that we are applying at the national level and at a higher level, people have a completely different understanding, and that is why they were quite peeved that they felt that this was a persecution of the person. So I mean, the solution, right. And I think people have already said about it, that those rules have to be looked at again.
All right. Thank you. Hold on for us. We intend to be really very brief with this. And Assin won with 17,245 votes. That represents 57.56% of the valid votes cast, whilst Charles Opoku of the New Patriotic Party got 12,630, representing 42.15%, and then the Liberal Party's Sefanu Benis Enyonam got 87 votes, representing 0.29%. Now check this. In 2020, Jachikwe Singh had, in 2020, he has 17,498 votes. That represented 55.21%, as against the NPP's candidate then, Abena Druwa Mensah, who had 14,193 votes, representing 44.79%. Yes, Mr. Mould, what do you, of course, you in the NDC, you have been very, jubilant about this, more particularly on the wake of the allegations, more particularly against the NPP, of vote buying. And I saw footages where you could see clearly, vote buying being done so openly with such impunity. There was one particular place I was watching this other network where they made sure that there was a certain house that before you vote, you go to that house before you come vote. And then when you are done, you go through that house before you go wherever you go. And the claims we understood was that people were going there to take money, so they come out and vote. And you also sort of swear or take an oath, so to speak, that you were going to vote for the candidate. I saw one footage where officers of the NPP had come, and then people rushed to the vehicle, were taking money. Some officials were involved. They were called by the TV station. They were asked, you were sharing money to the people on the day of voting. That is against the law. And they said, no, these people had come from long places and they are just sorting out their T&T. I don't know the last time the Electoral Commission make people vote in places that is so far from where they live that they have to be giving T&T to vote.
Yes, this is something that we saw in Kumewu, so we were expecting it in Assin North, because Assin North was, Kumewu, they won the 2020 by, if you add the independent candidate who is an MPP member, they won it by over 90%, the parliamentary seat. And we won, we improved from 9% to about just over between 20 and 25%. And we saw what they were doing. We were surprised, some of us were really surprised at what they were doing in their stronghold. So we knew it was going to be even on the larger scale in Assin North, and it was expected. But first of all, we would like to congratulate the NDC leadership in the strength that they showed, supporting our candidate, James Jachikwe Singh, throughout his trials and throughout the election. And the support was overwhelming. The support was given from the top leadership of the party to the central region, who organized this election on behalf of Assin North. So I would like to say they did a very good job. They were very professional. And we also like to state that the Electoral Commission did a very professional job, especially the people at the polling stations. We were very impressed with what they did. And the police must be commended, and that we give it to them.
Once you win, the Electoral Commission has done a good job.
No, I'm giving for. I was at the polling stations. I was one of the polling the agents there, so I saw it firsthand. I'm
just imagining that if things went the other way, the NDC would have raised accusations, and the EC perhaps may have been the first to take
Well, things went the other way in Kumewu. You didn't hear us say that, did you? We lost the election in Kumewu.
You're right about that.
So we did not say that. And right. I think institutions in this country must be devoid of politics. And we are not seeing it in many institutions, SOEs, judiciary. We're not seeing it in the in many areas, but particularly the areas that are supposed to regulate things for us. But the EC in Kumewu and in Assin North did a good job. That's my personal view, because I'm
Right.
giving a first hand.
So I return with a quick one for all of you about what this victory represents. There are those who say it's a victory to spite the courts or to tell the courts that you are wrong. And some say it's a victory that tells you what should happen, what may happen in 2024. Is that bit an overstretch? Andrew Ejapamesa, MP Second D and Deputy Minister for Energy, joins us. Of course, the NDC too was accused of some level of vote buying, but you heard them say, we are not in power, so we can't afford much. So what? It's okay to be buying votes. It's a criminal conduct according to our law. So Ejapamesa, you were so sure that the people will not vote for someone who will be jailed. In your words, that you are sure that he will be jailed, and so on. So what happened?
Samson, good morning, and good morning to my co-panelist, my good friend Kojo. It's been a while, and then Alex as well. It's been a while since I came on your show. And good morning to our cherished viewers. Samson, I'm sure that you and I, based on our training, okay, which essentially is grounded on precedent, you can make reasonable inferences as to what is likely to happen when you are confronted with the same set of facts for which the court have had an opportunity to pronounce on. And so, following from the Abu Sakande case, where, amongst others, he was convicted of perjury, which essentially arose at the time that he deposed to a statutory declaration on filing his nominations that he owed allegiance to no other country other than Ghana. Same set of facts that Mr. J.C. Kwesi is facing. And so on the strength of that, I am certain in my mind that when his criminal prosecution is concluded, unless of course he has any evidence in his defense, which really is in doubt, because the depositions were clear. I have a copy of my nomination forms here. I made a deposition before a judge to the facts and the truthfulness of the statements that were contained in my declaration. And the law is clear. I believe in Section 280 of the Criminal Offences Act. You make any such statements. And indeed, in the Statutory Declarations Act itself, there are criminal sanctions that follow. And so let's wait and see. But then I was expecting that.
But I'm coming there.
Yeah.
I am sure that if the comments that you made and you repeat here, if they were made by someone else without the clout that you have, and perhaps not being on the side that you belong of the political divide, they'll be cited for contempt, and they
I don't think so.
And they will be convicted for doing the trial, literally.
Not at all. I don't think so at all. And you and I know the rules that govern contempt. Yeah, there's a thin line between commentary that is had in the public domain and one that affects directly the outcome of a particular case. I'm saying that based on the set of facts that are contained in the Adamu Sakande case, I can draw a reasonable inference that that's likely to be the outcome of the case. I don't think that that is prejudicial at all, because if you relate to facts that have been established in a particular case.
Prejudicial means that you are judging the case. You are judging the case ahead of the court. And how else would you have judged the case ahead of the court when you say?
I'm not judging.
When you say with absolute certainty that you have no doubt whatsoever that he will be jailed because he has broken the law.
Of course, the facts speak to themselves. And I'm saying that based on the precedent in the Abu Sakande case, I can make a reasonable inference. That doesn't mean that my inference is what the court ought to, as it were, follow. the court is enjoined to follow the president and the rules and to come out with a decision as regards the evidence that is before it.
But Japa, let's be clear about the differences in the two cases. And
yes,
there are clear differences, are they not? In Adamu Dramani Sakande, he had not filed to renounce his citizenship at the time he picked nomination. Neither had he received a renunciation certificate before he was elected. And then by the time he was elected and sworn and he was a member of parliament, there was no any indication that he had attempted to renounce his citizenship of 2 other countries. In this gentleman's case, he had filed his renunciation before he filed his nominations. The Supreme Court only said that you filed the nominations before you got the certificate. You filed in October, and you got the certificate in November. So that's the only thing that we have, the only difference situation we have with you.
Well, so the offenses under the Statutory Declarations Act, when does it kick in?
No, I'm saying that there's a difference to the extent that Adamu Dramani Sakande was in parliament.
I don't see the difference.
Was in parliament and traveling on documents that meant that he was not he was a citizen of other countries. This gentleman is not in the same situation.
In fact, I'm told that Mr. Jechikwesin actually traveled in February of 2020 on his Canadian passport.
No proof.
I'm told. I don't know for a fact.
Okay, that's a rumor. So let's
yeah, of course.
Let's not deal with the rumor.
I'm saying that Samson, the point really is this. At the date that you make a deposition, you depose to a certain set of facts. And so whether you had applied, because obviously if you apply to University of Ghana and you haven't received your admission letter, you can't begin to attend lectures. Okay, you cannot claim to be.
But if I tendered, I think there are two different things. And hear me. If I resign from University of Ghana, the same example. Please listen. If I resign from University of Ghana and I have not received acceptance of my resignation, I am entitled to say I have resigned, and I'm not a member of University of Ghana.
The question then arises that will follow thereof is: are you required to receive acceptance of your resignation from University of Ghana before you cease to be a student of University of Ghana?
The question that follows logically again. The question that follows logically again is whether by what I have done, I have an intention to deceive anybody.
But of course, Samson,
yes,
of course, that would be a matter that the court would interrogate. But I'm saying that if you look at the Statutory Declarations Act, you depose to a set of facts on a particular day. At the day and time that you made that deposition, were you a Canadian citizen or not? Your intention, as far as I'm concerned, to cease to be a Canadian citizen is immaterial.
Oh, but in criminal prosecution, you must prove the fact as in the act, and then you must prove the intention. And if there's a letter showing that I have no intention, and to tell you a lie, is that not important?
Samson,
yes.
Samson, I'm saying that at the time that you depose to those set of facts, your intention is immaterial. You are saying that positively, that I have no allegiance to any other country other than Ghana. Was that the case?
Yes.
How was it the case?
There are people who swear allegiance to a country where they are not citizens of. Does that matter?
Well, let the court decide.
Okay. All right. So that's really where it belongs. The court must decide.
Absolutely.
But I thought that it was clear that for those of us who are lawyers, not to confuse the viewers and listeners when we say this is the same as Adamu Dramani Sakande, because they are completely different. Yeah. All right.
Samson,
yes.
The offense of perjury.
Yep.
Okay, it's clear that on a particular time when you make depositions to a certain set of facts which you know to be false, you've committed an offense.
Yeah, you are lying on oath. And he says, I didn't lie on oath. I had
and
applied to
so if I
renounce.
had an intention
When I
that
was
I'm
challenged,
not
the
lying,
EC actually cleared me and said,
really?
you have not done anything wrong.
Well, let the court decide. We'll
Right.
see.
Right. Thank you. Now, so the question is, you were so sure, once again, that you will win this. So what happened?
Oh, of course. I mean, the dynamics of every election is different. Kojo made the point about the local dynamics in Assin. And obviously, those of you who were on the ground and those of us who monitored on the media space clearly saw what was transpiring. Politics of lies, deception, falsehoods. You know, when you go out there and make comments to the effect that a candidate is being hounded out of parliament, if you like, because you need the numbers to pass some LGBTQ act, which you know to be false. Because I know the proponents of the bill includes a member of the MPP. I'm a member of the Parliamentary Committee on Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. We have interrogated the bill. We've done a report. Nobody is against the passage of that legislation that seeks to clarify, if you like, provisions in our existing law on same-sex relationships in this country. But of course, the sentiments of the people is what the NDC sought to play on, lying and all sorts of things. And it is what it is. But you see, Samson, Kojo also made the point about people not appreciating the nuances of the law. And in my own sober reflection, I don't think that the Supreme Court decision itself was far-reaching enough. Because this is the 8th parliament for which the court ruled that Mr. Jetty could not hold himself as a member of parliament, and that his election really was invalid. And so the Electoral Commission, based on that, then conducts an election, a by-election, in which this same individual is participating. How does that do to the decision of the Supreme Court?
His election was invalid because by October 2020, he had not received a renunciation certificate. But by November, he had received a renunciation certificate before he was elected in December, and he was sworn in.
At which time the process leading to the conduct of the 2020
by the Supreme Court's ruling, if he had received the renunciation certificate in October, his election will be valid. So what's your argument?
So I'm saying that at the time that he obtained the renunciation certificate, the processes leading to the 2020 election had closed. And so he could not validly participate in that election for the 8th parliament. So how then does he then turn around and participate in an election to replace that MP after he had been removed? Because what did that mean? Effectively,
interesting.
Is to render the decision of the Supreme Court.
Are we looking forward to another challenge? Are we looking forward to another challenge on this ground in the Supreme Court?
I'm just bringing this up so we can all think through it to see whether indeed.
So let's move away from this. Do you share with those who say this could be an indication of how 2024 will go?
I don't think so at all.
All right.
Because, like I said, and like Kojo pointed out, all elections are local. It's interesting how there's a clear distinction between now Kumewu not being a competitive election and that this one is the first competitive election. And Alex draws the independent candidate, the vote that he obtained, and adds it to the MPP candidate and says that because they're all coming from the same stock, they got 90% and the NDC got 10. The truth of the matter is that there were 3 candidates that contested the election, one on the ticket of the New Patriotic Party, one independent, and one from the NDC in 2020. Each of them obtained the votes that they did. And I'm saying that really had no bearing whatsoever on the Kumewu by-election, which occasioned as a result of the untimely demise of my good friend Baswa. Okay, 2024 is going to be a completely different set of elections. My expectation is that yes, the economic circumstances that we find ourselves in now is a challenge for us. But of course, we've seen the data that is coming out. Right. First quarter growth of 4.2%. Clearly, it's an economy that has begun the process of recovery. And by the end of the year, all things being equal, we'll be seeing clear positive growth indicators that would assure Ghanaians that the NPP, as always, is the best that can manage the affairs of this country and its economy going forward. And so I don't share the view that this is what is going to transpire in 2024 at all. But of course, we are a political party, and we ought to learn lessons from every election. Right. We ought to re-strategize if there are issues. We need to do comprehensive studies of what informed the decision in Assin.
Thank you.
And to draw that would inform our preparation for 2024.
Thank you very much. That's what the party, through your General Secretary, has urged, and the President has also urged, hoping that in 2024, Assin North will turn blue. Dr. Kojo Asante, obviously, if the NPP had won this morning, what they would have told us would be that, see how 2024 looks like. Unfortunately, they lost. And, they lost. And now the story is different. If the NDC had not won, they clearly won't like how it will be projected. Now that they have also won, they will also like to project it to 2024, as they have begun saying. What do you say, Dr. Asante?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are a long way from December 7, 2024. So there's still many things to be resolved. The NPP's own internal party primaries have to be resolved to know who is the candidate. That would, help assess the strengths of the candidates going into the election. So I think for me, this election, it does give the NDC some more confidence about its own sense of competitiveness going into the 2024 election. I think that, at least if there's any lesson to be taken from, Assin North, is the MPP have to look at the way in which they, use incumbency advantage in elections. Because if you create a certain sense among the voters that, a sense of almost like impunity, I think it will backfire if that begin to reflect in many constituencies as the campaign rolls out. I mean, we've seen it before, even in 2016, it was on the other way around where, the MPP was seen as the one that was lacking the resources, and then you saw all of the pageantry and pomp with the NDC. That kind of narrative can completely undermine a campaign. And I think it showed in Assin North that when people feel that they are suffering, they are struggling, and they see money's being, given to and just spent willy-nilly, it becomes a problem. So I think for me, that's the extent to which I'll go in terms of its implications.
Yeah, what
I think we are a long way.
What are you going to do as civil society organizations, serious ones like yours, you, CDD, together with, I think, IDEC, you have been very critical about ensuring enforcement and compliance with the political laws and regulations. We know that this is what it is. Unless you find situations where the people involved can be said to belong to the party, not in government, you are not going to see prosecutions happening. Prosecutions is a discretionary thing. It's a political decision that the regimes take. The law says you need the Attorney General's fiat to prosecute on election offenses. Where the accusation is heavily tilted against the NPP, you clearly are not going to see any prosecution, but you must make sure that something happens.
No, I mean, for me, I've tried to impress on the special prosecutor, who is charged with dealing with politically exposed persons, to get into this space, because I really think it's not just about vote buying. I think it's vote selling and vote buying. So I think that just examples have to be set in
Right.
terms of even the citizens who are also receiving the votes.
Okay.
So but I think the tactics should include undercover, because you're not going to really get people coming forward, to say we are receiving cash.
All right.
So I think that you need to deploy
All right.
investigators that go undercover.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante of the CDD. Yes, he was on the ground. Finally, with you in a minute, what can you say? Is it not too much of a stretch to suggest that this is an indication of how 2024 will go?
Well, we've had two by-elections in areas that are considered strong NPP areas. One is the Kumewu, and Assin North, prior to 2020, was an NPP stronghold. And what we have seen is very clear to us that the Assin North victory basically is a victory for truth and justice. Let's put that aside. The margin is what we should talk about. The increase in margin from just over 3,000 to close to 5,000. And that is a clear message by the people of Assin North, representing the people of Ghana. A very clear message, talking about the hardships that this country is going through and what this government have plunged us in. Okay. However, if you also, we've also said that if we get a good referee, if we get a fair, impartial referee, we've always said this, there will be less intimidation. But we saw intimidation in Assin North. There were buses, VIP buses that carried a lot of macho men, but the police were able to stop that. If we do have a fair, unbiased electoral commission and a diligent police force, there is no way that the MPP can win 2024.
All right.
Especially given the hardships this country is going through and the work that the NDC is doing.
Thank you very much. We will be taking a break here, and when we return, we'll find out how ECG and working with the government will make sure the IPPs are paid so that we don't get plunged into doomsday anytime soon. We'll be right back.